Hey everyone, welcome back to the Grand Duke Dmitri YouTube video series. Usually 6 days a week I'm William, but today I am the servant of God Dimitrios, which is the name that I am called by the priest when I approach the chalice in my Greek Orthodox Church. So that is my Sunday name and the name that I'm called in my parish, Dmitri. So I have that in common with the old boy. Anyway, we have different saints, and Dimitri's saint is going to come into it today. So, yeah, we'll get to that. Our recap, the last video, we were in 1915. We had Dimitri's arrival, not Dimitri's arrival. Well, Dmitri and Maria both arrived in Usovo from Moscow, but we had Maria's arrival in Moscow early in the morning, accompanied by Georgi Laming, and then they went back to Usovo, which Dmitri was quite unhappy about. He didn't even seem that thrilled to see his sister, honestly. And she didn't seem that thrilled to be there. So we'll see how that develops. Our last 1939 video, this reference to the shame and impotence of the Soviet Union and Dmitri's sense that it would soon collapse, and that the dynasty would be restored. I don't know if he really believed that or not. He professed to. It was definitely wishful thinking. There was nothing that I can think of that was pointing in that direction. He was also at pains to refute this idea that people had formed of him when he was part of Young Russia, that he was, in a sense, pro-Soviet and proud of Soviet accomplishments, and he really wanted to say, no, that's not true. And he also was quite dismissive of Ukraine. It's small potatoes. But that, I think, was more or less because he wanted to downplay everything that was going on with this idea that Vladimir Kirillich would or was interested in becoming the king of the Ukraine. So this is the interview. This is the Candide interview. I said we were in 1939. I always get that mixed up. We were actually at the very end of 1938 was when this interview was published, December 28th. And yeah, the last thing that Dmitri said in that interview, the last thing that he said that I have covered was that it would be a mistake to lend Stalin the prestige of becoming known as the defender of Ukraine if, in fact, the Germans invaded Ukraine along with some Tsarist Russians, then Stalin would emerge as the defender of Ukraine. And Dmitri did not want Stalin to have that honor. So that was one of the reasons why he was telling the Russian emigres that they should not support the German designs on Ukraine. So our cast today, we have Vladimir Kirillich. He's back, and we have the man who was the one-time hetman or head of state of the Ukraine, Cossack by the name of Skoropadsky. Now I've forgotten his first name and patronymic, which is shameful. I forgot to look that up. Okay, so let's start. And we start with Dmitri. He says, last September, thousands of my emigre compatriots consulted me on a matter of conscience that was of crucial importance to them. And then Fayard asks what they should do if war were to break out. So he's guessing what the advice was that they wanted. Then Dmitri says, here's what I told them. Obey the law, join the army of the country that has given you hospitality, but with one exception, do not enlist in the ranks of an army that would fight against your country. We want the end of communism. We want it with every ounce of our strength. But Bolshevism is a sickness. Russia is the sufferer. We must not cure the disease by killing the sick person. Or, if you prefer another image, I cannot listen to the counsel of those who say, buy a good insurance policy and then set your house on fire. Beyond being cynical and repugnant, it's risky and dangerous. The insurance company might discover the identity of the arsonist or simply not pay. Now Fayard asks another question. Is Grand Duke Vladimir in Berlin? And Dmitri answers, yes, but don't be fooled into believing that he went there to conduct negotiations. I guarantee his total adherence to all the ideas that I've just now laid out for you. Anyway, he's still very young and has never known his country. He simply went to Germany to see members of his family, and his denial correlates with his intentions. And do the Germans take the Romanov seriously anyway? You know, they also have another candidate for the throne of this hypothetical puppet Ukraine. I'm talking about Hetman Skoropadsky, a candidate on the left. You'll probably, and he puts the left in quotation marks, which is important. You'll probably hear other names mentioned soon. Trial balloons, trial balloons. Okay, I'm going to end there because there's a lot to talk about here, and I'm just quickly, you should absolutely know Skoropadsky's. Yes, I did look that up. It was Pavlo, the Ukrainian form of Pavel or Paul. Okay, so Dmitri claims that thousands of people contacted him, thousands of emigres, and they contacted him in September of 1938. Well, why September of 1938? Well, because that was when there was this Munich Peace Conference and everything was up in the air about whether Germany was going to go into Czechoslovakia in the form of an invasion and take the Sudetenland. And as it turned out, the Allies, Chamberlain simply ceded the Sudetenland to Germany, which was shameful, of course, and it didn't stop the war from happening because then, as we all know, Hitler decided to invade Poland, and that was just going a step too far. So apparently, yes, well, not just apparently, I remember talking to British friends who were alive, children, in 1938, who just talked about how terrified everyone was that there was going to be war break out at any minute. In fact, my friend Philip Goodman, whom you've heard me mention before, and he passed away this year, unfortunately, at the age of 93, and he was a child in 1938, and he remembered going out for tea with his mother, a special treat, and a woman in the same tea house or whatever it was just suddenly stood up and said, "We're all going to die," and she was very distraught, sort of the opposite of the British keep calm and carry on. And Philip's mother just, very coolly said, "Oh, never mind, dear," and the rest of the people in the restaurant also, or the tea room also, just ignored it. And I guess the woman got hold of herself and didn't pursue it. But anyway, that's the mindset that people were in. And so, I don't know about thousands. That might be an exaggeration on Dmitri's part, but I'm sure it's true that people did approach him, that emigres did approach him for advice on what they should do if a war breaks out. Some of them had taken citizenship in the countries that they were living in. Some of them, like Dmitri himself, had not done that and had the Nansen passport. Those who were citizens, I'm sure, would be subject to the draft. And at that point, it was pretty much up in the air as to who would be fighting against Russia. Would it be Germany, or would it be Britain if a world war broke out? And Germany and Britain both wanted alliances with Russia, but it was not clear at that point. So that if that was Dmitri's advice to people, it was good advice, I think, very good advice. And it's a shame that that right-wing contingent of the Russian immigration didn't listen to him, and a lot of them did enlist in the German army. So anyway, where was I going with that? Yeah, was it thousands of people? I don't know. I don't know. Probably an exaggeration, but at the same time, as I say, I don't doubt that it actually occurred. And the interesting thing is that, in the absence of Kirill, who died in 1938, not sure what month, he was the person that people wanted to turn to for advice, not to Vladimir, who was 21 years old, and that probably made Vladimir angry. But anyway, okay. Dmitri himself, I wonder how they contacted him. He says thousands of people contacted me, but he doesn't say how. Did they write him letters or what? Even if it wasn't thousands, even if it was, say, 50, how did they contact him? But he had set the example early on of having a commission in the British Army in 1918, and that was something he struggled with a little bit, and by some people was advised against doing because, there was still Russia. It was unclear if the Bolsheviks would prevail or not, and yet he was swearing allegiance, taking on a commission in an army of the Army of Great Britain, an ally, of course. He never fought for Great Britain, but it was not an honorary commission. They thought about sending him to Malta and some other places. But, this kind of explains why, again, it was a gross exaggeration, but it kind of explains why he feels the need to actually lie and say that he did fight for the British, but when it came to fighting against the Bolsheviks, he drew the line and said, no, I won't do that. An outright lie, but it's it's the example that he wants to set for people of this is what you should do. You should not take up arms against your countrymen, even if they're Soviets. Okay, and then the first example he gives of Russia being a sick person. And Bolshevism is a sickness, Russia is suffering from it, and you don't cure a disease by killing the sick person. And that, to me, I could be wrong. I mean, his guardian, when he was coming of age, was a Russian Orthodox nun. And he did talk with her about theology and things like that. We've just had an example of that in the 1915 diary entry. And this example is very Orthodox in the sense that the Orthodox Church is one of the primary differences between the Orthodox Church and Western Christianity, whether Catholic or Protestant, is that there's no doctrine of original sin. And that sin itself is not considered from a judicial standpoint. It's a crime, and blood has to be shed to expiate that crime and give you a clean slate. Sin is seen as the metaphor that's used is of sickness. So from the Greek word hamartia or hamartion, I don't know which is the plural, meaning missing the mark, missing the target. And the main metaphor that's used is one of illness, rather than you've committed a crime when you sin. You've committed a crime against God. So, it interests me that he used that metaphor. I have no idea whether it was, in fact, because of his Orthodox background or not. So the next metaphor he uses, of course, is of the insurance policy. And, if you burn the house down, or the building or the business, then the insurance company may figure out who the arsonist is. So in this case, they would figure out, that it was actual Russians who went in and attacked Ukraine together with the Germans. So that's not a good idea. He's 100% right about that. And now we find out that Vladimir is in Berlin. Very, very bad timing, my friends. Very bad timing, because it really does give the appearance of him going there, if not to negotiate, then at least to show that he's pro-German. Now, his sister, Kira, was at this point a Prussian princess, married to Prince Louis Ferdinand of Prussia. And so he had a good reason for going there, as Dmitri points out. Whether he did indeed go there simply to simply to visit his sister, I don't know. He would come back to France, but it's not good timing at all. But anyway, so Dmitri, he points out that, yeah, he has family there, and that's why he's gone. And this is what I found on the Wikipedia article about Vladimir, the one that I'm not terribly impressed by because it claims without any commentary, just unequivocally, that Vladimir rebuffed this offer by the Nazis, which of course we know is not true. But here's what it says about him during the Second World War. During World War II, Vladimir was living in Saint-Briac-sur-Mer in Brittany. On June 26, 1941, he issued this statement. And I quote, "In this grave hour, when Germany and almost all the nations of Europe have declared a crusade against communism and Bolshevism, which has enslaved and oppressed the people of Russia for 24 years, I turn to all the faithful and loyal sons of our homeland with this appeal. Do what you can, to the best of your ability, to bring down the Bolshevik regime and to liberate our homeland from the terrible yoke of communism." Aha! The important part of this, so this was after Germany had declared war on Russia. What are the Germans doing? Well, they've declared a crusade against communism and Bolshevism. That's what they're doing. Forget the whole Nazi thing. Oh, this is a crusade against communism, so you should all jump on the bandwagon. Now, he does throw in that almost all the nations of Europe have declared a crusade against communism, but he starts by mentioning Germany. In this grave hour when Germany, etc., has declared a crusade against communism. So, to me, that's, what can you say? What can you say? That's a pro-German statement, and in being a pro-German statement in 1941, it's also a pro-Nazi statement, and it's also telling Russians to go fight against their countrymen for the Germans who are invading Russia. So, that's, to me, that's shameful. And he wasn't 22 anymore. He was still young, of course. He was still in his 20s. But, there you go. And people did exactly that. And that was exactly what Dmitri was trying to talk people out of doing. So, in 1944, after spending a brief period in the camp, the concentration camp in Compiègne, where a lot of Russians ended up, he was moved by the Germans to Germany, and he lived there in one of Louis Ferdinand's castles. So here's Dmitri, and he's telling Fayard, well, I personally guarantee Vladimir's adherence to this principle that we've laid down, that I've laid down, basically, about the Romanovs not collaborating with the Nazis or any other group of people who attack either Russia or the Ukraine. And then, of course, with Dmitri, the eternal question that he's asking basically from the time he's a boy. Here he says, are we taken seriously? But for Dmitri, there was always that question, am I taken seriously? And he so much wanted to be taken seriously. But in this instance, he's not complaining that he believes that the Nazis don't take the Romanovs seriously. And that's a good thing. It's interesting what he says, that they have other candidates for the throne. First, Skoropadsky. So he was, and then he puts in quotes, a candidate on the left. So Skoropadsky was not a leftist. He did not fight for the socialists or the communists during the Civil War. But in this instance, I think I understand that what Dmitri means is that that Vladimir would very much be the candidate on the right. So he would be representing monarchism, whereas Skoropadsky would be not. Skoropadsky would be more sort of, he would be the hetman, not a king. So it could be a republican form of government. Actually, it would be a German puppet form of government. I'm a little distrustful now of Wikipedia, because Wikipedia says that that Skoropadsky consistently refused offers to collaborate with the Nazis. I have no reason not to accept that as the literal truth. It's just that after the whole Vladimir thing, I do wonder. But I think Skoropadsky is now considered a hero in Ukraine, maybe a little equivocal, a little like de Gaulle. People admire him, but there are some things that they don't like so much. But anyway, he was really, you need to read Белая Гвардия by Mikhail Bulgakov, the White Guard, because he's a character in that. And the fact of the matter is that he did support German involvement in Ukraine, but not during the Second World War, during the First World War. After the revolution, there was, what was it called? The People's Republic, the Ukrainian People's Republic. And it was a socialist state. And he did not want that to be the case. And so with German support, he overthrew the Ukrainian People's Republic. But then when Petlura's socialist peasant Ukrainian army came into the picture, and the Germans started pulling out, and Skoropadsky and his officers, his Cossack officers, pulled out too. And that is one of the things that you have in the White Guard that Bulgakov talks about. That Bulgakov, this was his lived experience, street-to-street fighting in Kiev. It's a fascinating book. And his brother-in-law in the book, I don't know about in real life, was one of Skoropadsky's officers. And his brother-in-law actually leaves his wife behind and gets on one of the last German trains to leave and goes. And so this, of course, really, the family was shocked by that. And so Skoropadsky does not come out well in the book. Young Bulgakov was fighting on the side of the Tsarist troops against Petlura, and against the Red Army. But when the Germans and Skoropadsky pulled out, it was, it was a big shock and scandal. And yet the white Russian troops there did continue to fight with the Red Army ready to pounce. Okay, I like the way Dmitri says trial balloons, trial balloons. He says that there are going to be other names mentioned as well. You'll hear soon, Fayard, that Skoropadsky's name will come up in other names as well. And I wish I knew to whom he was referring with these trial balloons. As what ended up was that you had about 1 million Jews and about 4 million non-Jewish Ukrainians killed during the course of the Second World War. So it was a real slaughter. And boy, Dmitri just could not have been more right about that. Okay, what do we have next time? We have in 1915, basically just fun and games with Maria and starting a new book that's one of these that kind of belongs to the occult and theology, a very interesting book. In 1939, when we return to that, we'll have the last part of the interview. And here, Dmitri is really talking to Fayard about what is Ukraine? Specifically, what is it in relation to Russia? So that is very interesting stuff. Another book that you might want to have a look at, and I can never remember the author's name, is And Quiet Flows the Dawn. It is written from the viewpoint of a young Cossack who fights in World War I and then during the Civil War, and he everything is so chaotic during the Civil War that he just switched sides all the time. And the same with Dr. Zhivago. Both of those books just show you how absolutely chaotic the Civil War was. Yeah. And then after we finish with this interview, I think I'm going to go to Dmitri's speeches, the speeches that he gave in 1936 and 1937, or was it 1935 and 1936, to young Russia, for young Russia throughout France. And you can see the sort of prelude to this and why people suspected that he was a Soviet fellow traveler. So let me know if that sounds interesting to you. The other alternative would just be to, for the moment, just to go all in with 1915. And yeah, I hope to see you then. Bye.